Again, welcome. Today we're going to talk about some specific details around how Alyeska Pipeline has implemented a combination of Transpara's visual KPI software and the PI system to yield some pretty interesting results. Darryl's here to talk about the challenges and what they've accomplished there. We'll have a couple slides on visual KPI and how it works with PI. We'll do a little demo of the layout of information, how the Trans-Alaska Pipeline maintenance and operations folks use visual KPI, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. And of course, I think Darryl is really ready for just about anything you can throw at him. He's a very deep and knowledgeable person because he was, in fact, the maintenance program lead for all this stuff that we're going to talk about. So why don't we get going here? And Darryl, I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for attending, everyone, and welcome. Tell you a little bit of background about the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. And we're not going to go too much on each one of the slides individually, so if there's any follow-up questions at the end, I'll be glad to field any of them questions. But the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, 800 miles long. It just went through a significant reconfiguration, and we went from 12 pumping stations down to 4 pumping stations and what we call a re-injection station, giving us a total of 5. 1.4 million barrels per day is, not as the maximum that the pipe is capable of, but it's the maximum for where the injection pumps and the current configuration of mainline pumps are today.
So, Darryl, you mentioned in our discussion yesterday that it's kind of like multiple businesses all in one. The pipeline isn't just about moving oil, but it's a whole ecosystem around it. Can you maybe spend 30 seconds on that?
Sure can, Mike. And so when people think of pipelines, move oil or gas or liquid or some product. But the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, what makes it unique as a pipeline is the cities and remote areas that are self-contained with personnel that have its own power generation. For example, any one of the pump stations, pump 3, pump 4 that you can see on the map, produces about 30 megawatts of primary power and then 5 megawatts of what they call secondary or emergency power. They have their own utility system, wastewater management. So if you think what it takes to run the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, it's sort of a small version of a little city. Own power generation, own water, own sewer, septic, and we use PI to monitor all that data and the visual KPI to get that information out abroad to other people. So just to kind of highlight a few of the challenges that Alyeska went through here after reconfiguration and the distribution of PI and everything that we needed for all the reduction in personnel that we're having due to just a normal attrition rate. People get older, they want to move on, do other things. But today, the uptime is just as important as it was 20 years ago when we pumped over 2 million barrels a day. The thing that people really get their attention on is when you tie uptime and performance to people's bonuses, and it gives everyone a whole new perspective on what role they play in keeping the Trans-Alaska Pipeline up and going. And so if the pipeline goes down and it's an unscheduled shutdown, people are scrambling, grabbing PI data, using visual KPIs, communicating through management to every level of the organization, so that way the pipeline can meet the criteria of the 99.9% reliability. Just imagine the logistics across 800 miles and moving people when you have an interruption when the closest person could be 300 miles away. So leveraging all that available resources and personnel, equipment, and trucks and getting the right discipline to meet the regulations, because not everyone can do the same task. So just matching up all the personnel, the equipment, and data, PI and visual KPI plays an important role of getting the right people to the right place at the right time. So, everyone knows Alaska is a challenging environment to work in, but just think about the middle of the night when you have an operations center, call someone that is 400 miles or 300 miles away from an area where they have the area of expertise, and it's dark, it's cold, it's windy, typically around -50 in the wintertime. Utilizing visual KPI, that operation controller or the online supervisor in the middle of the night can now see who the individual is they need to contact. That individual can share the same data as that operations people are seeing, and then can make an evaluation. Do I need to go out in the middle of the night? And so, having that individual not have to drive a couple hundred miles in the middle of the night is huge, because it takes that person out of the rotation of his shift if you have to send them out. So having the ability to access Pi and look at the same data distributed across the entire system of every personnel in the organization really creates a great business opportunity for when you have to address a notification, event, an alarm, or when you can move on and address it during normal scheduled business hours. And so, this is one of my favorite slides in the whole presentation here. And it's, obviously, I love winter because I lived in Alaska for 33 years, but more importantly, troubleshooting maintenance on the pipeline is an ongoing task. And I don't want anyone to, think from this slide, just because it takes 5 hours in the middle of the night to get anywhere, that dog sled is our only method of operation. Alyeska uses, helicopters, trucks, fleets, just like every other organization. But it's a cute slide in the sense that you get the sense of how remote things are. And, in Alaska, every mode of transportation is a good mode of transportation from anywhere. So this here is, one of our remote gate valves. And so when you have executives and you have operations people, you have engineering people, and you have maintenance people, everybody has sort of a different level of understanding on what's a remote gate valve. Well, some executives and managers and directors know that we have remote gate valves. Some of them might even know what the design basis or the purpose of having a remote gate valve on a pipeline. But when you're using visual KPI and you're pulling Pi data or AF data, wherever the data is coming from, executives, operators, SMEs, engineering, and maintenance people can now visualize the same data in the way that they need to see it. And we're going to demonstrate that a little bit here in a minute. So here's our Valdez Marine Terminal. So we started out in the great northern part of the state of Alaska, up by Prudhoe Bay. We've just traveled down the pipeline in 800 miles down to the marine coast. And you can kind of see some of the ships out there, waiting for having the crude offloaded from the large tanks up on top of the hill there, each one of them about an acre of land that they sit on. And so how does the organization optimize and get people to recognize how to save money, how to keep the equipment going? And with visual KPI, you not only have all critical parts of data for each department broken out, but you can then share that same information and find new ways of saving the company organization. So everywhere I've given the presentation on Pi and visual KPI, people always want to know what is the return on investment for the product. How difficult is it to install? How long does it take to get it up online? How many resources does it take to keep it going? And for this demo we did here, literally we have a couple hours, invested in time in it, and I think you'll be able to see pretty quickly on how your organization, can go through, reduce diagnostic errors, reduce time to decisions, reduce the amount of time. If your organization has people that work night shift and day shift, like Alyeska Pipeline does, and you have to pull in, a mechanic or an engineer during the middle of the night, and now that person, wherever they are, has the ability from home on vacation to be able to see the information and to make a good decision on what direction or what action needs to be taken by your organization, you will see them numbers go up every year. SME remote access, I can tell you that wasn't a a big seller when I first rolled this out to everyone at LAS, and when I did the presentation internally, it was, just imagine every SME in our organization, 1,000 LAS employees and 5,000 contractors now can have access to this information when they're on vacation. Imagine the applause I got for that. Not much. But as an organization trying to maintain a large complex system with a finite amount of resources like every organization has, whether it's through attrition or whatever reason, you have to be able to leverage everything to the maximum that you can to survive. Whether it's regulatory compliance, whether it's power generation, management of a process area, all of that rolls up the same way for every organization. Okay? I won't read through all these things here, but certainly take a glance at them. We can ask some questions to them at the end of the presentation.